Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. I've got a great one for you. I've done a podcast interview with Evan Lutz, also known as the BowTiedCyber. He's the founder and operator of the Zero to Hoodie Cybersecurity Bootcamp. And Evan comes very well qualified. He has 4 degrees, 2 associates, a BA in math and a master's in cybersecurity. And he's helped over 115 students start their careers all over the world in cybersecurity and tech. So if you're someone looking to break into this market or start a career in cybersecurity, this is the podcast to listen to. He's got an interesting background. He started teaching high school math in 2018 and left in 2019 after completing a boot camp of his own where he secured a highly paying cybersecurity entry-level role. He's worked as a network security engineer. He started his own business, which he'll tell you more about in the podcast. And since June of 2023, he's been focusing on his own bootcamp and his cybersecurity firm, Gough. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below and enjoy. Okay. Evan, great for you to be here. Great to see you. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, so it's great to actually get this booked in. I mean, I'm in Australia. You're in the States, Florida, I think, aren't you? So thank you for...
Sure am. Yeah. I am here in Southwest Florida, Fort Myers.
Well, thanks for, I know it's pretty late for you there, so thanks for making the time. But as we've mentioned before, I am a recruiter, a career coach, and one of my specialties is cybersecurity. I thought it'd be a great idea for my listeners, people who watch my videos, if we could pick your brain today and, just get your thoughts on the current state of the market, what you would do if you were to get into cybersecurity from day one, from now, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we can have a really great chat about that. So
yeah, absolutely. I think so as well.
So to start off, Evan, I know who you are, but just in case any of our audience don't, why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself and, your journey in cybersecurity?
Yeah. So my journey goes back to 2019, where I had decided I did not want to continue to be a high school math teacher because that was the only job that I could get with a degree in math. So anybody who knows me knows that as somebody with 4 degrees, 2 associates, a bachelor's in math, and a master's in cybersecurity, I am a staunch anti-college advocate. I think it is one of the worst ROI decisions that you can make, at least in America. Now, internationally, that can be a different consideration, but when you simply look at the underemployment rate, which from most estimates that I've seen is around 50%, meaning that you've got about a coin flip chance of not using your degree when you have it for the job that you end up settling in for your career. In addition to the fact that we have a student debt crisis in America, I think it is safe to say that it is no longer a strong value proposition to be telling all of our young people that they need to take out potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in order to get an education that is not going to ultimately further their career. So I got my degree in 2018 in math, went to go be a high school math teacher, couldn't get a job doing anything else. Then I quit that and I entered into a cybersecurity boot camp. And in 5 months, I got a job making $90,000 a year base salary, about $100,000 total comp as a network security engineer with no previous technical experience at all to speak of. Then in 2021, I started a Twitter account helping people start their careers in cybersecurity, what I would have done differently now being in the field, having gone through a boot camp and not like the traditional college route. And since we've helped 115 students start their careers in 11 countries all over the world, including Australia.
Hey, fantastic. That's great. I mean, Evan, it's a really interesting thing you brought up there about, the college or university degrees, because I do think, I don't know what your thoughts on this. I do think it's starting to slowly take on now about the fact that you don't necessarily need to go to college or uni, as we call it here. I mean, it is, as kids, it is certainly where I grew up. It was very much you go to school, and when they talk to you about what are you doing when you grow up, it's always, well, what university, what are you going to study? It's never anything else. It was what university do you go to? And I do think that people like yourself, where you've come out I mean, you've got every degree under the sun there, by the sounds of it. I mean, you've really got a lot. And you're coming out now saying, you don't need to do this necessarily. And I'm not saying to everyone you don't go to uni. We're not saying that. But I think it is starting to come around a bit that you do get thousands, hundreds of thousands in debt. You may not get anything from it. It's not always the first port of call that should be taught people. So that's really interesting you bring that up. Now, before we go on, you mentioned then how you've helped how many people? Did you say?
115 students start their careers across 11 countries all over the world. So let's see. It's US, UK, Canada, Honduras, Brazil, Germany, France, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, and actually most recently Australia. That was the newest one we added to the list. That was earlier this year. And that's all students with their first jobs in technology.
Fantastic. So let's talk about that then. So why don't you tell the audience about, firstly, tell us about what your name is on Twitter, because it's doesn't necessarily come up as Evan.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my my handle is BowTiedCyber, BowTiedCyber. So I'm BowTiedCyber on all platforms. My main platforms are Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram.
All right, and tell us about and
TikTok as well.
So you are, as you've said, you're a cybersecurity professional. You've worked in-house, but now you actually run a boot camp. So I think this is, I've mentioned this in some of my videos and talked to some of my clients about this. There's different ways to start cybersecurity. You have obviously the degree option, which you can do. You've got all the certifications. You've got all these different avenues in. But there's one way that people may not know about, and that's starting or entering boot camps. Now, you run one yourself. You've helped 115 people. Tell us a bit more about how your bootcamp works and why people should consider this avenue.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I appreciate the floor for that. Now, I don't want to turn this into too much of a sales pitch. I want to give you guys the methodology behind how to start your career in technology that doesn't involve university, and then it'll be apparent as to why the bootcamp exists on the other end of that. So if you want to start a career in technology, you need every leg of what I referred to in my ebook as the three-legged stool. You need certifications, you need skills, and you need a strategy. Your certifications are an objective standard to an employer of what it is that you know. It does not tell an employer everything that you know, but it does tell an employer what you know at a minimum. A college degree could never do that, right? If I have somebody who applies for a job who says they have a bachelor's degree in information systems, what does that tell me that they exactly know? I have no idea. Why? Because every school's curriculum is different. Everybody seems to be under a different accrediting body, which means that there are different standards across universities, but ostensibly they're all accredited, which means something, right? So they're upholding some kind of standard. But what does that standard mean in the way of technology? Furthermore, there's liberty that can be taken from individual professors, from individual courses, as to who passes and who fails. So does this tell me that you actually learned enough about technology to earn this degree? Or does it mean that you played politics well enough for 4 years to be able to earn the degree? We don't know, but that's exactly the point, is that we don't know. And employers also know that they don't know exactly what that means. But if you get a Network Plus certification, then that tells an employer that you understand an objective minimum amount of networking, right? You might know way more than that. You might have your Network Plus and your CCNA and your CCNP and your CCIE, right? You might be like a top tier network engineer, but if you have your Network Plus, it tells them that you have at least that minimum level of knowledge, right? So those certifications are an objective standard, and that's great. But the problem is that employers are paying you to do things, not to know things. So you have to prove to them that you are a person who is capable of doing things, not just knowing things. This is where we develop our hard skills, right? And I say, for like, I can get into the whole roadmap later, but whatever sector of technology you want to go in, That's where you want to learn the skills that are going to be directly applicable to the kind of job that you want to get. And then you need a strategy, which is how you go about showcasing to an employer that you are somebody who both knows things and is capable of doing the job. That's when you make some kind of portfolio. And that's where you have a strategy for how you're going to go about acquiring that first position, whether it's networking, whether it's going to conferences, whether it's cold messaging people on LinkedIn, whether it's emailing MSPs in your area, whether it's doing a volume approach to applications on Indeed Quick Apply, whatever the thing is for you. And I guess the other side of that is what we do in the boot camp is we help you expedite that process, where we focus on certifications, hard skills, and strategy that you need to get a job effectively to set you up to become a network security engineer, which was the first job that I had in industry. The reason why is because that's pretty well the capstone. I don't mean that to be arrogant to say, oh, well, that was the job that I got, so that's the best job that you can get without experience. But realistically, it is the best paying job that you can get without experience. I was an anomaly. I set the record for my school when I got my job, making $90,000 a year base salary in 2019, coming out of that boot camp. And so that's something that I try to set my students up to do as well. At least that's the core of what we have in the program. If we have students who want to aim even higher than that, then we can help them position themselves for that. It's just going to take some supplemental resources outside of what we have in the program.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So how long did the boot camp that you took yourself, Evan, how long did that last for?
That's a good question. I think we had the boot camp itself was about 16 weeks. It was about 16 weeks. I ended up coming out of that with a Network Plus and a CEH, a Certified Ethical Hacker certification, and also some other hard skills that I had picked up along the way.
So 16 weeks, and you got a 90,000 US job as your first entry-level job into cybersecurity. As you said, you were a maths teacher, right? A high school teacher.
Yes, sir.
So I think,
I almost doubled my income.
Yeah, wow. I think that is the opportunity cybersecurity can really offer now. I mean, people, you got to love it. Don't get me wrong. I think people who ask me, like, why would I get into cybersecurity? Is it, it's good money? Yes, it is good money. It can be. But I think it's always evolving. There's always new things to learn. I think you need to be on the right. I don't know. I think there's a lot more to it than just what salary can earn. However, the fact that you've did a 16-week course, you took what you learned into action, you come out with that job, shows you it is possible. And now you're bringing all of that knowledge that you've done to create your own boot camp, and you've helped these people around the world, which is interesting around the world. I mean,
100%.
It's not like it's all different countries. Yeah. I don't want to assume things, but one of the best decisions you made, it must have been.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So this boot camp in 2019 was the thing that changed my life. Here's the thing. I spent over $200,000 on my education. Okay. Again, 4 degrees, 2 associates, a bachelor's in math, and a master's in cybersecurity. The only money that I don't regret spending, the only money that I spent on my education that actually did anything for me was the $20,000 I spent on a boot camp in 2019. Right. And even then, the reason why that boot camp was good is because I lucked out. And I happened to get a mentor who had decades of experience in the industry. So here's the thing. Technically, this man was brilliant, but he didn't really know how to help me get a job, right? Yeah. I was completely flying blind when it came to actually getting the first job. All they did was teach me the content, help me pass my certification exams. Yeah. It was up to me to figure out, how do I actually go about getting that first job? So I remember I was doing a whole bunch of CTS, capture the flag exercises. Yep. And one of the things I thought about, and I asked my mentor, I said, maybe I should start just documenting some of these and putting them in a blog on a WordPress site. He's like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. So that's what I did. In fact, you can actually go there right now to see my actual redacted e-portfolio. It was, I think it's BowTiedCyber portfolio .xyz. So you can go right now and see the literal e-portfolio that I had as the exact same WordPress server. And now it's all like branded and like BowTiedCyber and all that stuff.
Well, anyone who's looking to go into cybersecurity, go check that out, because you'll see what someone's done in that situation who's looking for a job. So, but yeah, Evan, that's I think as a recruiter, the amount of people I get come to me and say, "Hey, Luke, I've done my degree in cybersecurity," or it doesn't necessarily have to be cybersecurity, but I finished my bachelor's or I've done my master's. I'm even looking at this certification, and it could even be that they've passed one of their certifications and then they're stuck. And a lot of these people don't have an idea of actually how to go out into the market, and that's where I suppose I can come in. We talk about networking, we talk about making sure your resume is tailored and optimized, which we can come to. But the skills aren't necessarily learned. People learn the technical side of cybersecurity, but that doesn't mean they can go and take that to the market and actually get employed. So I know that you cover that in your bootcamp, and it's something I cover myself. And it's really important to learn those skills, the softer sides as well, because cybersecurity isn't all technical. There is that softer side, which I'm sure you would agree.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Here's the thing. You're dealing with stakeholders all up and down the chain of a company, particularly if things go sideways. And so having some thick skin really helps in cybersecurity. Not crazy, because you still have to be open to hearing what it is that people have to tell you, because your users are going to be your weakest point on a network. And so if you completely just like wall yourself off and you're not receptive to the things that people are actually there to tell you, like if you're just making enemies under the guise of this is my job and your opinion doesn't matter because I'm the professional, then you're going to have a bad time. So there's definitely a balance. I always find it interesting. One of the most common questions I get is, I'm X age. Am I too old to get into cybersecurity?
Yeah.
The answer is always no. In fact, I think in cybersecurity, we don't have ageism. We have reverse ageism, right? We don't discriminate against the people who are 30, 40, 50 years old. We discriminate against the young adults who are 18, 19, 20, right? Because in cybersecurity, it is you protecting the keys to the kingdom. And you really don't want to be giving the keys to the kingdom to somebody who doesn't have a fully developed frontal lobe.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that's not to say that it doesn't happen. I've helped plenty of young people start their careers in technology. But just know that if you're somebody who's older, the opportunity for you here is incredible. And if you're somebody who's younger, it can be done. Just know that you are starting one step back. You have to work that much harder to prove to them in an interview, when they show up and can see that you're clearly in your early 20s, that you're somebody who's mature and capable of this kind of role.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a really interesting point. There is no age limit in cybersecurity. So everyone out there, once again, if you're listening to this and you're midway through your career, or you may be towards the back end of your career, that if you're thinking about a change, and you like cybersecurity, give it a go. I mean, it's never too late. So Evan, I know what I did. I wrote some questions down that I wanted to run by you. Questions that I'm getting all the time by clients, people that reach out to me. And I wrote down 3 or 4 of the ones that stood out most to me that I get most often. And I think, once again, the listeners to this would appreciate if you could answer them and give your opinion. So I'm going to go through a few of those with you. I'd love to get your thoughts. One question I get a lot is, in your experience, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about getting started in cybersecurity?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest misconception is that cybersecurity is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Yeah. Anything come to mind on that?
Yeah. I would think the biggest misconception is that cybersecurity is synonymous with hacking, right? Which is actually could not be further from the truth, because the vast minority of jobs are actually hacking. And it's not that hard to understand why, if you zoom out a little bit. So if you're going to get a job as an ethical hacker, that effectively means that you're getting a job as a penetration tester. And if you're a penetration tester, it means that your job is to do adversary simulation to where you're trying to hack into a company and get as far as you can with their approval so that you can find the weak points of how somebody could get in and then report that to them so they can patch those vulnerabilities before an actual adversary does that and then takes the company for a ride, right? It's usually for compliance purposes. A company gets a pen test 1 week out of the year, but companies need protection from those adversaries 52 weeks out of the year. So it would stand to reason that you have significantly more jobs for the roles that companies need like 52 times more of, and it ends up working out exactly like that. I don't have actual numbers in front of me. I would estimate like 10% at most of the cybersecurity jobs are purely pen testing centric jobs. Now, are there a lot of roles, maybe an extra 20% on top of that, where you do some level of penetration testing, like testing individual apps on occasion in your downtime as part of like your additional duties as assigned when there's nothing going on in the SOC? That absolutely could be the case, and that is something that happens. Or say like you work for a cybersecurity firm and your job isn't to do pen testing, but on occasion you get a web app pen test or something like that. Yes, that can be the case. But if you're going to get a job strictly as a penetration tester, the number of positions available for that are limited. Now, they're not terribly difficult to get if you know what you're doing, because there's not a lot of people who are actually good hackers. So it's kind of a weird, almost paradoxical situation where it's like they're not crazy difficult to get for somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yep.
But there's not a lot of them. And that's just because it's a really hard thing to do well. And so it's really difficult to be somebody who's worthy of that kind of job title and that responsibility. But the people who are hackers, they do really well. They very much enjoy it. I have found that my friends who are hackers in this industry say they actually prefer it over something like blue team defensive, is because it's not reactive at all. They're good enough at hacking that even though it is their responsibility to properly uncover these vulnerabilities so that these organizations don't end up getting caught in a bad position, that they actually find that that is less stressful than like working in a SOC, like a security operations center, where you're monitoring alerts constantly day in, day out to make sure that there's not like the beginning signs of a breach into your network. So I would say that that's probably the biggest one. Second misnomer would be that you need a degree to get started in this industry, which I think we've already pretty well squished that bug. And I'm sure there are others. There are some minor ones for like the people who really know that, like some people would say like, oh, you need to get the CompTIA trifecta. You have to get your A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, which is dumb. Like the not AWS. The CompTIA A+ is one of the worst certifications that we have in terms of ROI. It's like a $500 certification. It's not going to help you in your career past what you would need for help desk. And you can just as easily get a help desk job with a Security Plus, which is actually going to do something for your career later on for a second certification. So there are niche circumstances where I would recommend the A+, but as a blanket statement, I would say that's not it. There's a bunch of other little ones out there, but those are probably the biggest three in order.
That's awesome. Yeah, I do. I think the hacking part's funny. If I speak to some of my friends or people that have just no idea about cybersecurity, they just assume someone's sitting in a dark room with a computer in front of them hacking into things like they see in the movies. It's definitely a misconception that unless you know a bit more about the industry, that's what does come up. And the degree one's an interesting point. Now we're going to get to your roadmap because I think that's going to be such a valuable part. So we will get to that. So, but next up is a question I get all the time is if someone is entirely new to cybersecurity, let's say they don't have much of a background, they may have had previous experience in another industry, or they could be fresh out of university. Either way, what would be your top 3 actionable tips to get started? What would be the top 3 that come to mind, Evan?
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to depend on what non-technical means, right? Because a lot of people who are not in tech think they're non-technical because they don't understand, like, CPU micro architecture, whatever. Like when I first started learning this, so my dad is like a lifelong computer programmer. He's worked for a Fortune 100 company doing software engineering and now performance testing uh, for, I think, 45 years now. So he's been around. I remember when I first started thinking that I wanted to get a job in technology, it means I wanted to get a job doing code. And so what I started doing was Googling how to get a job doing code. And then that led me down the rabbit hole of, like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and free code camp and all the front end web development stuff that I am terrible at because I am not a highly artistic person, as you could probably have guessed by the math degree, right? So, um, one of the things that I was doing is the only way that I knew how to learn anything up to that point was learn absolutely everything that I could about a topic, which is something that is just simply impossible in the world of technology because there's just too much information, right? And I remember trying to understand what the heck a CPU was and how it worked. And I was literally going down the rabbit hole of researching how CPUs are made and designed. And I remember asking my dad these questions before ChatGPT, right? We're talking circa 2016. I remember asking my dad some of these questions. Well, how does this thing work and that thing work? And how does it know? And blah, blah, blah. How did they know? How did they come up with this? And he was like, Evan, it doesn't matter. Like, you don't need to know that. Like, you only need to know, like, once the operating system is booted up, what do you do with that? That's some of the most valuable advice that I ever got. So I would start with that. Start with what you need to know to make computers dance once the operating system is fully loaded and functional, right? Because if you're going to go into, like, modifying Linux kernels and stuff like that, you're getting into a whole nother world that you probably don't want to be engaging in unless you want to be an advanced Linux systems administrator.
Yep.
In which case, if you're doing that, you're probably not learning a whole lot about pen testing, right? You can't learn everything, right? You could try, and you can be like an expert in one domain and like a hobbyist in all of the others, and that's fine, but don't feel like you have to be an expert in everything because you can't, right? But like if you're just getting started, let's assume that you're somebody who's like built a computer before. Okay. Then what you're going to want to do, in my opinion, is start with your CompTIA Network Plus, because you have to understand how networking works. You have to understand how computers communicate, because if you're going to be protecting computers on a network, guess what? Almost every vulnerability is going to, or almost every exploit is going to traverse across a network at some point. Are there exceptions to the rule? Yeah, if you take malware on a USB and plug it in, that doesn't have to be connected to the network in order to be able to do what it does. But even then, once it's exploited, chances are it's phoning home. And when it's phoning home and it's sending out a beacon, right? Guess what? That's going across a network. You have to understand networking. You don't have to understand it at a crazy level. Again, CCNA, if your goal is cybersecurity specifically, and for those who don't know, it's the Cisco Certified Network Administrator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your CCNA is for those who want to be, it's in the name, network administrators, right? If your goal is cybersecurity, you don't need to know how to administer a network. You just need to know how networking works, which is what makes Network Plus so great for that. At least right now, at the time in 2025, that's subject to change. I have speculation the Network Plus might be mostly dead by 2027. Until then, all of this year and all of next year, if you're like, where do I start? Start with Network Plus. The whole 2027, like, is Network Plus dying thing comes down to how pervasive is the cloud going to be with the implementation and the rapid scaling of AI.
Yeah.
That as we get more and more companies that are completely cloud-based, it just becomes less and less important to understand like color-coded fiber speed based on boot color. Right. It's just not as valuable as it once was when you had so many networks were still dependent on legacy systems, right? Versus being in the cloud where we now have an entire generation of engineers who are making far more W-2, like mid 100,000s, that have never touched a physical piece of enterprise equipment, right? Which hurts me as an old man because it's like, I want to think that I understand everything because this is how I did it and it worked for me. And it's like, but times are changing. And it's like, I would much rather change with the times than be validated. But if you have some basic understanding of technology, like you built a computer, you understand what it is. Maybe you've like made a Minecraft server at some point in your life, or maybe you've like made your own like crappy HTML website on a server, or you did something in your living room and like port forwarding, and like, you know, if you've done anything like that, you probably know more than you need to be able to get started with your Network Plus, and that would be the thing that I would jump right into. Otherwise, I would recommend studying for your CompTIA A plus for a couple of weeks. Don't sit for the certification. Save your money. Just learn enough of the basics to be able to jump into your Network Plus as soon as possible. I would skip over all the printer sections, and then you'll be good to go. And then you would go into like the rest of the roadmap. But we can get to that when we're ready to get to that.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice, and really interesting to hear that perspective. So before we get to the roadmap, I think you've answered another question I had was going to be around someone with a non-technical background, but how to pivot into cybersecurity. But I think you answered that then anyway. You know, study for the A plus without necessarily taking the actual certification. Do the Network Plus. I think if you're coming from a non-technical background, by doing that studying, by completing the Network Plus, that's going to answer that question. I believe that. And I think that brings us to the roadmap, because it's, I think ultimately, you know, I'm trying to tell people when I help them is, you know, this is the path we're going to work on together. Okay. You will start here, and ultimately our goal is to get you employed in X, Y, Z job, depends on what you want. And this roadmap, there are many different opinions out there. Mostly, I would say, cover similar areas, you know, certification wise, but everyone does have slightly different paths. And you've done a boot camp, you've gone down that path, but I want to hear what the BowTiedCyber, what you would recommend to people as a basic foundation roadmap from someone from day dot to get a job in cybersecurity. So everyone, if you've got pen and paper, get that ready, because take some notes here. What would you say, Evan, would be from start to finish, your guide to people in as much time? And I appreciate we haven't got all day. So just in your, yeah.
Oh, no. This is fine. So actually, the thing that gave me a little bit of rise on TikTok is I can speak really quickly. And so I ended up giving this roadmap in 15 seconds, and it kind of blew up and shook the cybersecurity industry. And it goes something like this. If you want to start your cybersecurity career in 90 days, making $90,000 a year, the first thing you're going to need are certifications. We're going to go with Network Plus and Security Plus. Optionally, you can add an Azure 900 and Splunk core. Then we're going to learn foundational skills in Linux, Python, and traffic analysis, make an e-portfolio, a one-page resume, and apply to 1,000 jobs. I've never seen this fail in the U.S., and it works every time, which is more or less true. Okay, so let's unpack that. That was really fast.
Yeah, unpack that.
Let's unpack that, right? And that has changed a little bit, and I'll explain the changes and deviations from that. I've said it enough times that it's just second nature. I can do it in my sleep. So we're going to need foundational skills, right? And and foundational certifications, right? Again, your certifications are an objective standard of what it is that you know. Your skills are where you apply what you learned in your certifications, where you're actually going to learn how to do things that you're going to do for a company that's going to actually make the money or save the money. And then we're going to have a strategy for how we're going to go about going from having 0 jobs in industry to having 1 job in industry, and getting the first job is always the hardest. So the way that we start with that is our foundational certifications. We already discussed Network Plus is the first one that you should get, in my opinion, and then go into your Security Plus. Now, CompTIA is a vendor neutral certification vendor. So all of their exams are not specific to any one technology or another, which is great for both Network Plus and Security Plus, because for networking and security, you're learning vendor neutral networking theory and vendor neutral security theory, because networking is networking, whether it's going through a Cisco switch or a Meraki firewall, right? Whether it's going to or from a Linux server or a Windows desktop, right? Networking is networking. It all adheres to the OSI model, like, your TCP IP connections, right? It is important to understand, because everything's going to be on a subnet. You got to know what that means, okay? Security is the same way, because security in and of itself at its core is a set of values and principles that help us uphold the CIA triad, the triangle of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which effectively means that the right people are able to access the right data at the right times, and that the wrong people are not able to access that data at all, right? To be able to make that sounds easy in principle, but to be able to do that in practice is actually rather difficult, which is why we have so many facets of security to consider. And oftentimes, what is the trade-off between security and functionality? Oftentimes, but not always, if you're making something more functional or easier to use, it usually means that you're offering up security. Now, that is not a linear, that is not a one-to-one. There are often small things that you can do to make it slightly less functional, that make it an order of magnitude more secure. And that's something that just comes with a little bit of knowledge and experience for what those things are, right? If you can defeat 90% of credential breaches, right, from having multi-factor authentication, yeah, you have to pull up a code on your phone and type in 6 digits, which takes an extra 15 seconds. But if your password gets compromised, somebody's not going into that service as you, because they don't have your device to get that secondary code, right? Little things like that. It's just one example. So Network Plus and Security Plus, optionally, you can add in Azure 900 and Splunk Core. Now, just to understand the scope of things here, by the way, this is my little fidget toy. It is a Raspberry Pi Zero that I was going to use to make a little mobile Wi-Fi hacker, and now I just fidget with it on calls. So that's what's up with this little PCB right here. This whole thing is a little computer that's got 4 cores and a half a gig of RAM on it. It's a whole computer right here.
Evan, it's funny to say that I've got the Raspberry Pi 5 arriving today.
Oh, right?
Yeah, arriving today.
Nice.
Just when I saw that there, I thought that was the Pi. But anyway, carry on.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I was looking at the higher levels of Pis, and I was finding that while they're really cool and they're very novel, I don't find that they're very worth it for the price point, depending on what it is that I'm trying to do. It's cool because you get a lot of power in a small form factor. But if you have the space and you don't need the small form factor, I find it is not a great value per dollar. Nevertheless, it is really cool. I will say there are the new NVIDIA PCs that have like their onboard dedicated graphics cards that are pretty beefy. You can get for like 250, the Jetson Nanos that are designed to be able to run your own local large language models, so that you can do things like create AI detection stuff that all runs locally, which granted, I'd be able to do that with this and an API key for ChatGPT through OpenAI. But that's a conversation for another day.
I'd love to go back to that. I could speak for hours on that with you. But no, it is awesome. But so sorry to interrupt you then.
Little outside of the scope of what we're here for. We want to help you guys get jobs.
That's right.
And who knows, maybe we'll come back for a part 2 and we'll talk about making some projects with these. But
absolutely.
So your Network Plus and Security Plus, if you have no previous technical experience, okay, again, but you like understand what a computer is, right? If you've effectively built a computer, or you're capable of doing that, if you've ever like swapped out RAM, or created a simple web server, then you probably know enough to of the foundational knowledge to hop straight into Network Plus. You can do Network Plus in 30 days, 1 month. It is about 100 hours of hard study. And we all know what hard study means. What does hard study mean? Shut up. You know what hard study means. You're sitting down, you're focused, your phone's in another room, okay? This is not you listening to a YouTube video and scrolling TikTok while you're not paying attention. This is hard study, like an hour of lecture, an hour of reading, an hour of practice questions, whatever it is that works for you. Okay. It can be, so Network Plus can be done in about 100 hours of hard study. It's about 3 hours a day, every day for 30 days. I did my Network Plus in about 3.5 weeks. I've had dozens of students who also passed their Network Plus in 30 days. Now, there are ways to cheat on this exam that I don't recommend, because you should not be using things like brain dumps, where you're going to seek out the test questions that have been leaked from people who have taken the exam previously. It's against CompTIA's terms of service, and it's not going to help you, because you need to actually learn the material. That's the point of the exam. So learn the material well enough that you're confident that you have a good chance at going in and passing. It's a pass-fail exam. Yes, you get a score, but your score is not something that's officially recorded. That's just for you to see, for you to know. Your certificate does not have your score on it, like your transcripts record your GPA. It's not how it works. You passed or you failed. It's a 1 or a 0, an on or an off. You either met the standard or you didn't. So if you think that you know enough to be able to go in and pass, go in and pass, because a pass is a pass is a pass, right? It's on a scale from, like, the passing scores are between like 720 and 900 for the Network Plus. Okay, I tell my students, a 900 is not a perfect score on the Network Plus. A 720 is, because a 720 tells you studied the exact amount that you needed to. And when I have a student who gets like a 721, I tell them you studied 1 point more than you needed to, right?
Yep.
And that's fine, because again, it's just a basic foundational certification on basic theory. A pass is a pass is a pass. It's the only thing that your employer is going to care about. The only thing they're going to care about less than your score on a certification exam is your GPA. Ouch, burn, zing. So sorry, I'm still bitter about college a lot. So,
I get it. I get it. It's fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah. And so starting from 0, you can get your Network Plus in 30 days.
Yep.
Okay. Here's the thing. There's about 50% overlap between Network Plus and Security Plus. So if you go straight from Network Plus into Security Plus, you can get your Security Plus in another 15 days, right? I've seen this happen time and time and time again. However, if you go, man, I just spent all that time studying for my Network Plus, I need to take a break from studying, and you take 4 weeks off and come back at it, you can expect it's going to take you another 4 weeks to get your Security Plus, right? Yeah. Because the stuff that you needed to know, like that minutia, that those little details are there, you're going to lose them, which is fine in the real world, because in the real world, passing your Network Plus just means that anything that was material that you studied on the Network Plus is only one Google search away from you being able to know it again like that. And that's what matters for the real world. On an exam, you still have to have it all up here. You don't get anything with you on the exam. All you get is a blank sheet of paper and a pencil.
Yep.
So, that being said, you can get your Network Plus and your Security Plus in a combined 45 days. Now, in about another 15 days total, you could get 2 more certifications if you want to. Now, as you can imagine, if you can get 2 certifications in 15 days, then those 2 certifications are going to mean significantly less than the 2 certifications you can get in 45 days, right?
Yep.
But they can still be valuable. And I can tell you what I surmise is the hiring manager's perspective on this, right? That if you have Network Plus and Security Plus, it tells Karen in HR that you quote unquote do networking, and that you quote unquote do security. And the same thing applies if you get your Azure 900 and your Splunk Core. So what are those? Azure is Microsoft's cloud platform, and your Azure 900 is essentially a marketing certification that says you understand most of the basic services that they offer. I got mine in 2 days, I think. I think I studied for and passed my Azure 900 in literally 2 days.
Pretty quick.
It's very basic, but when you have that on your resume, I think it tells Karen in HR, unless she happens to know what the Azure 900 is specifically, that you quote unquote do cloud.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because Karen is a non-technical person, right? She's barely a people person, and her whole job is to work with people.
Yep.
And then the same thing goes with Splunk Core. Splunk is the most widely known SIEM, security incident and event management platform in the industry. So if you have your Splunk Core user, which is a very basic exam on like multiple choice on how to use the Splunk platform, then which you could get in 7 to 10 days, then that tells Karen in HR that you quote unquote do SIM.
Yep.
Right. So that's part of the reason why I've come up with these 4. Now, of course, this is just the first third of it. The rest of it goes quicker, though. The why I've come up with these 4 is because it allows you to cast a very wide net for the types of jobs that you can get. You could put all of these together with the next phase, which is your hard skills in Linux, Python, and traffic analysis. And in our boot camp, this might be a little technical for your audience, but it'll be quick, so I'll say it anyway.
Go ahead.
The capstone of the boot camp is we put together what it is that you learned in your certifications along with your hard skills in Linux, Python, traffic analysis to make a small scale down version of a next generation firewall, which is in and of itself a small scale down version of the $1 SaaS that I made for my first company. Minus the intellectual property, it's all just the gluing together of open source technology that allows you to do something truly incredible. Every senior security professional that I've talked to, and I meet a lot of them in cigar bars, funny enough, all of them that I've talked to listen to that and they go, "That's the coolest thing I've ever heard." And I go, "I know, right? It's great." So it's always really well perceived, and that is going to position you to potentially become a network security engineer. And then, like we discussed, it's not that network security engineer is the greatest because I did it, right? For most things in cybersecurity, I don't see cybersecurity as like the mission. I see cybersecurity as a means to an end. It's a great career. It's meaningful work. You make a ton of money. It gives you the lifestyle that you want. And like the stuff that you do is actually impactful to like an organization. A company not getting hacked is essential to everybody continuing to make a paycheck and go home and feed their families, right? Companies statistically, according to the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, the majority of companies go under within 2 years after experiencing a data breach, right? That's a death knell for a small business, right?
Yep.
So, by being there to be able to prevent that from happening, you're able to make sure that, not just you and your kids, but Martha down the hall, like her and little Timmy are able to continue to be fed year after year. So, like that's just something you don't get in a lot of other industries, right?
I agree. It's people. I still think people out there don't quite understand how important cybersecurity is. So, couldn't agree more. So, Evan, we've got Network Plus, Security Plus, optional, Azure and Splunk. And then after that, you're talking about traffic analysis. Do you want to carry on from there and see what would be what?
Yeah. So those foundational hard skills would be real basic in Linux, Python, and traffic analysis, right?
Yep.
Of course, Linux being your open source operating system that runs 90% of the servers on the internet. Your Python is a very basic but extremely powerful scripting language that I strongly recommend everybody learn because it will help you to automate things. And then, of course, traffic analysis is going to be essentially applied networking, where you are analyzing the traffic that you so painstakingly learned to understand during your Network Plus. And then everything comes full circle. Oh, nice. Now, there's lots of ways that you can do that. Of course, on the more entry-level side of things, that looks like using a SIM, a security incident and event management tool like Splunk, and on the more entry level side and on the more advanced side, that looks like creating your own network detection and response platform, or effectively making your own small scale down version of a next generation firewall, right? And anything in between, which is part of the reason why I like to position people to become a network security engineer, because you can always land on one of those other positions that are tangential to it, that make slightly less money but are still great careers. So doing things like SOC analyst, Linux systems administrator, network administrator, security analyst, or at the bottom of that list, you end up with like your entry level help desk positions.
Fantastic. There you have it, everyone. Now, that's in terms of, because one thing where I really get involved in the process with people is, I think the next step on from where you would go for your roadmap, which is networking. In terms of, when I say networking, I mean networking as in, who are you meeting on a weekly basis? What conferences are you going to? Is your profile out there on social media? So that's what I mean by networking. And people who follow me and watch my videos, I don't think there's a video goes by where I don't mention networking in that perspective. I'm curious, how do you value the importance of networking in that roadmap in terms of getting the job?
Yeah, very good question. I've jokingly said on social media before, I've done videos before that say, like, most conversations about networking when you have no experience goes like this. Hi, my name's Evan. Hi, Evan. I'm Jan. Nice to meet you. Hey, Jan. Do you happen to have any positions open for cybersecurity where you work? Well, tell me, Evan, what experience do you have? Well, Jan, I'm looking to get my first job. Well, Evan, we don't have any open positions right now for somebody who doesn't have any experience, but if something opens up, I'll let you know. Thanks, I appreciate it. No problem. I'll give you a call. And they never call you back.
Yeah,
So
that's quite true.
I've literally been, I went to when I was trying to get my first job in 2019, I went to OptiveCon in at the Dallas Cowboys practice stadium in Frisco, Texas. And that was actually where Brian Krebs, the guy who broke the Target hack story, was the keynote speaker. And Brian and I drank beer together and kicked field goals at the Dallas Cowboys practice stadium at the end of the day or whatever. It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. 10 out of 10 experience. But I had so many of those conversations with people saying, like, hi, I'm a guy who knows things. And they're like, what have you done? And I'm like, nothing. And they're like, then bug off. Like, I can't do something with somebody who knows nothing, right?
Yep.
I find that has been a similar experience with most of my students. Networking is a magnification of the value that you already have in the marketplace. And so if you're somebody who doesn't already have a lot of value in the marketplace, you don't have a lot to magnify, right? Cybersecurity is a merit-based industry. It is entirely about what it is that you are capable of doing. That is always going to be your biggest hurdle. So here's the thing. Networking can put you in front of somebody who, if you are somebody who knows what they're doing, can put you in a position that can change your life. But simply knowing the right person is never going to be a substitute for knowing how to actually do the job. So I would say that the extent to which you should focus on networking, I think you should build out your LinkedIn. Because building out your LinkedIn is going to give you a public profile and, more essentially, a LinkedIn link to put on your resume, which that's a question that I have for you. A LinkedIn link to put on your resume to validate to both the ATS and to Karen in HR, who takes 0.1 seconds to look at your LinkedIn that you are an actual person and not another spam bot applying for one of these jobs on behalf of somebody who does not actually exist. I would say other than that, other than just building out your LinkedIn, adding connections, sending a few DMs here and there, maybe joining a community or two online, I would say you are infinitely better off investing either the time and applying for an extra 400 jobs or the money that you would take to go to a convention to get another certification than to go to a convention if you're somebody that doesn't have any previous experience.
Spot on. Everyone listening, I mean, I can tell you now that, and this applies to any job. It doesn't have to be cybersecurity, but if you're someone who's got, a good resume and you send your CV out to 10 jobs, you may get called for interviews. You may get hired. Don't get me wrong. You may do. But I can tell you now that the majority of people who go out there and network, whether it's in person, whether it's a LinkedIn group, on X, Twitter groups, whether it's doing a LinkedIn profile, building out your LinkedIn, the more you get yourself out there, the more opportunities will come your way. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what opportunities will come up. And if you had 100 people looking for jobs, and I can tell you now, the people that are most likely to get them are the people that don't just sit back with their CV and say, send, let's wait a week till I hear back, and then nothing comes. It's the people that get out there and network. And you could be the most technical person. You could be the best person on paper. But it's the people that network, the people that get their name out there, they make opportunities happen for themselves. So it is such an important part of the process. So yeah, as you can see, I'm quite passionate about that, but it really is important. So you mentioned talking about LinkedIn, you were curious.
Like it's the yeah, so it's to wrap up on that. What's that old saying? Fortune favors the prepared.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to be a completely technical person who is capable of doing something amazing, but that's where the third part of that three-legged stool comes in, which is the strategy for how you go about going from having 0 jobs to having 1 job. And what that strategy looks like is going to look completely different for everybody. If I have somebody who's trying to go in and get a tier 1 help desk position at an organization that has a 60% turnover rate in year 1 for their tier 1 help desk employees, I'm not going to focus so much on networking for that person. Go get your application out there. Go send out your volume of applications, because they just need people in, because they know that over half of them are going to be gone by the end of the year. Right. But if you're looking for a very niche, very particular job, or say you're somebody who, hey, I have 300 open tech jobs here in my small town of 600,000 people, and my kids go to school here, and we purchased a home and I can't relocate, then I'm going to approach that very differently, because you don't have the benefit of volume of applications that you can put out to simply, you don't have the numbers to play the numbers game.
Yep.
Right. Yep. So I mean, it's going to vary for each and every person. I do tend to find that networking is not particularly fruitful for people who don't have that extensive CV, right, of that previous experience.
Yeah.
But it is linear to where the more experience you have, the more valuable your network becomes, because the more you have to magnify of yourself as an individual, right? The question that I had about LinkedIn is, when I have somebody who comes to me and wants me to redo a resume for them, and that's a thing that I offer as an ad hoc service. I think for $200 I'll do a resume revamp for them. I'll give them an ATS optimized resume. We got all kinds of crazy AI tools that we use for the bootcamp. We've invested a ton of money in that, and I truly believe we have some of the best AI in the industry, period. Not even up for debate. I'm happy to do a walkthrough with anybody who wants to see, because I stand behind my product. It is unbelievable what we've come up with and the success rates that we've had for my students. I've had people, like, shameless plug, who have been trying to get a job for 4 months, who come into my boot camp. I give them access to our AI tools. We fix up their resume, and I had one guy a couple weeks ago, came in after like 4 months of not getting any calls back, got a first round interview in 48 hours.
The importance of
I mean, granted, most of that is because the ATS is just ruining everything.
Yeah.
right? Something happened like 4 months ago where somebody just flipped a switch and it was like the ATS just decided to shut everybody down.
Yeah.
And that has been so difficult. And so now we move to a very particular ATS friendly format of resume that has everything optimized for ATS. And one of the things that I find when I have somebody who comes to me, like a gentleman last week who purchased a resume revamp, 23 years of experience in IT, and in the last 12 months for the first time found himself out of work and unable to get a call back.
Yeah.
Now, that tells me, and he had his bachelor's degree in the industry as well, and a couple of certifications. But my goodness, 23, you've 2.5 decades of experience. This is insane. Very few people on the planet can say that. Okay. But nobody's calling him back. Why? Well, chances are my small brain is saying it's probably because nobody's seeing your resume, right? Which tells me that the culprit is likely the ATS. So he had like the formatting on his resume like wasn't great. Like it wasn't terrible. It probably would have been great 2-3 years ago, but now that's not going to cut it anymore. And I noticed he didn't even have his LinkedIn profile on his resume.
Okay.
So what I suspect is there are so many bots applying for jobs these days, right? Because you have so many job postings are fake because they're just data harvesting. And you have a lot of people who are pretending to apply for jobs that aren't real, right? Because it doesn't cost them anything. So they're reverse data harvesting. And so you've got, fake job postings and fake applicants applying for these fake job postings, and you get lost in the noise of the real job postings and the real applicants, but they're never like lining up to, and even when they do, oh, well, you didn't get back through the ATS, so yours got thrown away and never got viewed by a person, right? Because there was a bot that had a better suited resume than you, right? So I think the way that they're trying to combat that is by tightening down the ATS, which would make sense. The problem is when that happens, you filter out all the real people too.
That's right.
Right. So I would think that having a LinkedIn that is actually built out and looks like it belongs to a real person, I would imagine is something both for the ATS and for a hiring manager is effectively all but essential to prove that you are not just a spam bot applying for one of these jobs that doesn't actually exist in the real world. What say you about that?
100%. LinkedIn is essentially your digital resume. That's how people need to think about it. There's all the other social medias out there. You name them, Facebook, Instagram, X, whatever. LinkedIn is built as a business and essentially a hiring tool. That's what it is. So if you don't have a LinkedIn now that's built or designed at least up to date with a professional picture, all of your recent work experience in your stopped, you've got to have that. Now, another reason why it's good to have in your CV is because everything's online now, and a hiring manager, a recruiter, Karen in HR, as you said, if your your resume comes through and there's a LinkedIn there, a link, you can click on it. Not only is that ease of use, your picture then comes up. They can see you. They can see what else have you done that might not be in your resume. Oh, okay, you're from this area. Oh, so you know so-and-so. You're connected with so-and-so. Have a look on LinkedIn. It has who your mutual connections are. You may be connected to someone who knows the hiring manager. I can't stress enough how these little things can make a difference, because you could be at the end stage of a process where you've got through to the final round and you're up against someone else who on paper are both excellent. You've gone through 6 rounds of interviews. They love you both. They really are struggling to make a decision on who to take. This guy's great. This person's great. Who do we choose? It could, and I've seen it could come down to something on your LinkedIn where it says, he's connected to so-and-so. I used to work with that person in my last job. I'm going to contact them and get a reference. Now, you might think that sounds unbelievable. It isn't. And that is what can happen. So it's a long-winded way of saying you've got to try and make yourself stand out whenever you can. And LinkedIn is a great way of doing it. And don't just put the basics on LinkedIn. Spend some time. Make sure it's all built out. So yeah, Evan, it's a great idea to do. and it's incredibly important and it will help people's chances. Yeah, definitely.
How do you think the ATS or LinkedIn plays into the ATS for the likelihood of somebody getting through if they do versus don't have a LinkedIn on their resume when applying?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it does depend on what the ATS has been set up like. Um, different. It's normally the larger companies. Once again, to everyone here, it's not the smaller private companies that are, they don't often use ATS. But if you go to one of the bigger organizations, government, banks, they more or less these days will be using it, and they will have their criteria. And what an ATS does, without going too much into it, is essentially it looks for keywords and what they're looking for. So if they're after 10 particular skills, that ATS will be looking on your resume for these skills. If they're not on there, you're not going to get an interview. So to have LinkedIn or not could make a difference, but ultimately, I think if you can tailor your resume properly for each application that you send, don't just send a generic resume out to 10 different companies and hope. If you spend the time and look at the job specification, look at your resume, what do they need? Are the keywords on there? You will beat ATS. And I think people overcomplicate it. Make sure you tailor it. You will get through ATS if you do that. If you send a generic one, you might not. It's a coin flop. It's a coin toss.
Right.
Yeah, a coin toss.
So there was another. This was
Go ahead.
there was a there was another there was another thing that we started doing, and because the ATS has become so pervasive in the modern job application strategy, is I quite literally have my students create we create resumes for them, right?
Yeah.
But when they custom tailor their resumes, we always have them submit their resume as a plain text document on a Word doc, specifically docs, DOCX extension. Plain text in a docs file, that's what we upload. From the research that I had, docs is slightly more ATS friendly and slightly less user friendly, because depending on what version of doc the hiring manager is opening it in, can change the format slightly. But if it's plain text, it should be negligible at best. And I have been finding that by adjusting the keywords, so I'm actually looking at a template. This was the gentleman who had 23 years of experience that I just did his resume for. Okay. We're talking name on the top, and then below that, it is city, state, bar, phone number, bar, email, bar, LinkedIn link, right? Below that, I've got like his title, right? Senior application administrator, cloud focused IT professional. His paragraph, right? His like objective overview, right? His technical expertise broken down by section, right? Cloud platforms as a list, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and it's got like EC2, EFS, S3, such and such, right? Operating systems, Red Hat, Windows Server, application administration, like, API builder, gateway, Apache Tomcat, Hadoop, all this stuff, right? And so it's like broken down by like subsection, and then professional experience, the whole thing. Education and certifications below that, and at the very bottom, I have additional information. U.S. citizen, semicolon, no sponsorship required, available for full-time employment immediately, references available upon request. This is the kind of structure, plain text on a Word document, that I have been finding has been working well for my students. Now, here's the thing. Everything that I do when it comes to helping students get jobs, it is a complete black box. Okay, I have no idea what it is that's happening on the inside, right? All I know is that we have students who are giving inputs and getting outputs.
Yep.
And so all I can do is say, if we put in these kinds of inputs, do we get those kinds of outputs? And so I have found specifically that format of resume that I just described, plain text on a Word document, that is the thing that that does really well for getting people through the ATS. In addition to, I suspect that the ATS also looks at the cover letter to pick out keywords.
Yeah, it can do. And that's another area, cover letter. People ask me, should I write one? Should I not? What have you? Yes, write one. You know, what about if they do look for cover letter and you haven't done one? But another tip, and what you just said there, Evan, is really interested, and anyone listening to this will be, that's a tip to try and beat ATS. And just remember something, that your resume ultimately is to get you an interview. Once you have an interview, it's down to you to sell yourself. It's down to you to meet them in person. Your
Amen.
resume gets you interviews. Don't overlook it. You need to, firstly, how do I get an interview? Then your resume, to a certain degree, can go to the side. Okay, let's prepare you to get through the interview process. So that's very
Amen.
important.
Amen. That is exactly it. Yes, I have said that exact same thing for years, that your resume has one job and one job only: to get Karen in HR to pick up the phone and call you. Once you are face to face with your interview, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They are going to ask you technical questions to make sure that you know enough to be able to reasonably do the job within a reasonable time frame after onboarding. And then they're going to check to see if you are the type of person that wouldn't make them sick to your stomach to see your face every day.
100%.
That's it.
Exactly.
Right?
So that is key here. And you know, the hiring manager, when you sit down with the hiring manager, they have the faith, they have the knowledge that this person wouldn't be sitting in front of me if they didn't have more or less the skills that I'm looking for. So now they'll test you. They'll ask you some questions. They'll make sure that you can back your resume up. But it's more about, can you fit into our culture? What are your long-term ambitions? Who are you as a person? Can I work with you 12 hours a day, 8 hours a day, whatever it might be? So you need to find a way that you can get that interview. And from a cybersecurity perspective, ATS is a big problem because it is very keyword driven. Cybersecurity jobs do look for certain, certifications, technical skills that you've got. Now, anyone that might be listening to this that isn't cybersecurity, it's unlikely. But if you're for general career advice, ATS isn't going to be in every single job you do. You don't send that resume to certain companies. That's why you need a career coach, a recruiter, someone to help you, because some smaller businesses aren't going to want to see plain text. They're not going to want to see that. It works very, very well, like Evan was saying, in cybersecurity type ATS systems, but you need to tailor it for who you're applying for. So I feel we could sit here and talk all day on resumes, but it's such an important area. But I just want to cover, there's so much, Evan, I could talk to you about today. I mean, we'll have to do a part 2, I think, but I do want to pick your brain on one more thing that
I think so.
that comes up all the time for me. And this is a very recent thing. When I say recent, the last 2 or 3 years, and it is AI. And I know no one really knows yet exactly what's coming. We have good ideas, but of course no one really knows. But I want to get your opinion on, because I get questions, Luke, cloud security, is AI going to take my job? Is help desk, is AI going to take my... I want to get your opinion on just your thoughts on AI and cybersecurity.
Yeah. That's a really good question. So this is something that I'll send you a link that you could put in the show notes. I wrote an extensive Substack article on this. So this was I did a full deep dive investigative analysis, and the long and the short of it is, in the short term, it will reduce some cybersecurity jobs. In the long term, is actually going to increase the total number of cybersecurity jobs. But even then, it is only going to reduce cybersecurity jobs for the stuff that is so simple that it could effectively be automated by AI. The problem is, cybersecurity is not a solved system, right? And even if it were, so this is a two-part consideration, but I like giving this thought experiment, okay? Cybersecurity is not a solved problem, therefore it can't be automated. That is a fact, right? At least as of today, it is not a solved problem, so as of today, it can't be automated. Okay, great. But there are parts of it that can be automated, like real basic SOC work. And so we are going to see more AI going into those kinds of things, which is why it may begin to reduce demand in the short term. But we have so much demand, both in the US and worldwide, that if anything, it's just going to chip off so many jobs at the bottom that demand stays constant instead of looking like this, like it does year after year after year. Okay, but imagine this. Say cybersecurity were a solved problem, okay? And say there was an AI solution that came out today that any company could buy. It would be a 4-week onboarding process, would cost them 3% of their annual revenue, and they were guaranteed to never get hacked again, okay? Say this mythical product did exist, all right? Just because this product exists today doesn't mean that everybody is on board today, right? Simply the process of businesses adopting new technology is one that is a slow cutover, and it takes a long time. So even if this were a solved problem that had a relatively inexpensive solution that they'd be able to fire everybody in their workforce and just do, super cyber AI to solve all of their problems, okay? If that were the case, then it would still probably take 24, 36, 48 months for that to even happen. Yep. So if you're somebody in the industry, you can see the writing on the wall, and then you can figure out what you want to pivot to so that you are not left with your hand in the cookie jar when your job gets automated away. That being said, the research indicates that not only has that not happened, but that is not going to happen at any point into the near future. I do think that Tier 1 help desk is going to be the first thing to be automated away. 80% of Tier 1 help desk tickets are related to password resets. Okay. The work itself can be automated away. The reason why not all Tier 1 help desk is going to go away is because sometimes people just don't want to talk to a computer. Sometimes people want to talk to another human being. Okay. So even if it reduces like 50% of Tier 1 help desk jobs in the next 24 months, which it very well might, it's not going to completely eliminate it. But even then, if you're getting into help desk, your goal should not be to stay in help desk. Your goal should be to take that as a launch pad, get some money in your pocket, get a little experience so that you can actually move into your forever career. Right? You should look at help desk as the stepping stone that it is. It is a starting place, not an ending place. If you were to get a job as a network security engineer, that's a 6-figure job. Like, that's an ending place if you want it to be an ending place. Not everybody needs to go become a CISO in their life, right? Someone's actually got to do the work, not just manage, right? So, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I've made it to this point in my career and I'm happy to stay here, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Just know that the lower down on the totem pole you are, the more likely your job is to get chopped off by AI. The higher up you go, of course, the less likely that is to happen. So here's the thing. When it comes to any industry that revolves around computers, AI is going to take the simplest jobs, take the jobs in order from simplest to most complex. Okay? Even in the way of things like copywriting and graphic design, right? The best copywriters in the world are not going to lose their jobs to AI because AI can't compete with the level of copy that the best copywriters in the world can do. But now if somebody wants to start a blog, they might do it with ChatGPT instead of like doing it themselves or hiring a copywriter, right? Same thing with graphics design. Like, do you really think that Chevrolet is going to just use ChatGPT to create their graphics for their next ad campaign that they're going to spend $100 million on? Are you kidding me? Not even close. They're going to go hire somebody and pay them $50,000 to create the best infographic that you've ever seen so you could buy their next truck that breaks down in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, God, sorry, Chevrolet lovers out there. But that's the whole thing, though, is that like just because something can be outsourced to AI doesn't mean that it always will, right? And oftentimes AI is not going to do as good of a job as a person who really knows what they're doing. So effectively, if you're a person of value, and bonus points if you're somebody who actually knows how to leverage AI or build AI systems, golly, could you imagine that? If you're somebody who knows how to do that, then you're not going to be replaced by AI,
No.
right? Because you're going to be leading the way instead of being swallowed by the wave. You're now riding it.
Yeah. I'm optimistic. I really am. There's two trains of people that, you got the doomers and you got the optimists. I think it's going to be here as a good, and yes, there's regulations that need to go into place, and that's a whole other topic to go down. But I think in terms of cybersecurity, yeah, I agree with you. I think there are some positions that will struggle, and if you're in those positions, think about, okay, this might happen. What is my roadmap to get to where I need to be, where my job isn't at risk? But in general, I think it's going to be there as a tool to make humans more productive, cybersecurity people more productive. But having said that, everyone who is worried has a right to be worried. And if you are in one of these positions that could be automated, well, now's the time to start thinking, what's my career path? So yeah. So Evan, look, honestly, great. I could chat to you all day about so much stuff, but look, thank you so much for your time today. I think the audience would have learned so much, and hearing from someone like yourself who's been a really interesting background. You've been a maths teacher, so you were a teacher moved into cybersecurity. You're someone who's done multiple degrees and is now saying you don't need them. The point is, people could relate to your background. You've covered degrees. You've been a teacher. You haven't gone straight out of school into cybersecurity. You did a boot camp, you got a job very quickly, you've started your own boot camp, you're helping people, you're a professional in this industry that knows what they're talking about. And I hope a lot of people would have learned from that today. So look, tell everyone how do they find you? What do they do?
Yeah, so you can find me on all social medias at BowTiedCyber. You can find me at BowTiedCyber.com. And I guess you could also go to my Stan store, stan.store/BowTiedCyber has become the new place that I direct everybody to. And there's all kinds of goodies and fun things that you can see there, including you could try our AI or a very simplified version of it. That's designed to be able to answer any and all questions that you might have about the boot camp, and it's trained on like my methodology and my ebook and all that jazz. So it is surprising the kinds of questions that people come up with, and the kinds of answers that it's able to give, and it always seems like it is like dead on point. So yeah, and of course, if you're interested in checking out the boot camp, you could always download the program guide, book a call, whatever. But my goal is, and I've said this for a long time, it's like what I do here for my business is not for the money. I'm a lot more interested in helping people actually start their careers. If my only interest was to make as much money as possible, I wouldn't be on social media, and I wouldn't be dealing with the death threats and the crazies who want to garner attention for themselves, right? But just because something isn't easy doesn't mean it's not meaningful. In fact, few things in life that are worth having come easy. So if I wanted to do this strictly or if I wanted to just maximize my income, I would disappear off the face of the earth, and I wouldn't be dealing with the crazies anymore. And then I would go upskill and leverage my previous experience to go stack a bunch of cloud contracts. and then I would be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, 1099, and you would never hear about me again. But that's a lot less meaningful, because I'll tell you what, there are few things that you can do in this life that will materially change somebody else's life more than doubling their income.
Yeah, It's awesome.
helping people work their way out of poverty. I've seen people go from making $30,000 a year working for UPS to making $130,000 a year doing, insert XYZ thing in technology or cybersecurity. And it happens all the time. So it's like, those are the kinds of stories that I'm here for.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. And so look, check Evan out. I'm going to leave all the his socials, etc., in the show notes. I'll also put in a link to his bootcamp if you want to check it out. If you're not, connect with him on X. I know he's always posting interesting stuff on there. And yeah, thanks again, Evan. Really appreciate it. We'll have to speak soon. And thanks everyone for listening, and take care.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Luke. It was a pleasure.